Bean and Nothingness is an obscure puzzle game that consumed my life and dreams for an entire 2 months. In this essay, I hope to articulate everything I learned from the experience, but first, I'll try and pitch the game to you just in case you want to try it for yourself with minimal spoilers from me. First off, if you enjoy really difficult puzzle games, it's an instant recommendation and it will keep you busy for a very long time. If not, well, hold on a sec. You might still like this one in particular. It's different, I'll say that much. The best way I've found to describe Bean and Nothingness is that it's the exact midpoint between Stephen Sausage Roll and Factorio. Bean and Nothingness centers its puzzles around turn-based processes that are set into motion by the player, spawning monsters out of beans that interact with the environment and each other in various spontaneous and emergent ways. It gets very complex very fast, and with regards to difficulty, it is in a class of its own, and yet, I'd wager it's got a smoother onboarding process than most puzzle games I've played. Like, Stephen Sausage Roll is excellent, but when you don't know the answer to a puzzle, it's almost like there's just an amorphous question mark between you and the solution. It's notoriously unwelcoming because it asks you to scrut the victory conditions yourself. Bean and Nothingness, by contrast, has an unusually simple win state as far as puzzle games go. You just need to get this pretty young lady to the goal. That's it. This makes the experience of solving puzzles into a pretty simple process of working backwards from the end state. Almost every puzzle has at least a reasonable place to jump off from. Like, you might notice that there's some rocks in the way of the finish which can be smashed by one of the monsters you have available in this particular puzzle. But how do you gain the materials necessary to spawn it? Where do you spawn it? What do you do with it after it's done its job? What other jobs can it do? Bean and Nothingness is that kind of puzzle game. The problems are rarely abstract or obscured, and the hardest puzzles are defined, for the most part, by just how many steps there are to reason through between you and that elusive little solution square. It's like trekking up a mountain. The huge system of interactions also means that you can't really brute force things. The number of puzzles that I found the solution for accidentally is very small. You'll be spending most of your time with Bean and Nothingness staring motionlessly and thinking before a hypothesis comes into your mind that you can run an experiment for. It makes solving exceptionally difficult puzzles into something almost breezy. However, Bean and Nothingness does trade these frustrations for, let's say, some novel and interesting new frustrations, and the question is whether you'll like these ones more or not. On multiple occasions throughout your playthrough, you'll discover without a doubt that a puzzle is just provably impossible, until you manage to suss out an obscure mechanical interaction that you only just now had the chance to experiment with. Without spoiling anything, one monster that's introduced deep into this game ended up revealing a peculiarity with a monster from like 3 islands ago, and there's a puzzle that's designed to be legitimately impossible until you figure out what it is. This interaction turned out to be relevant again a total of 1 time after this. And if you've played the game, you know I could be talking about one of 2 different puzzles. But for some reason, this isn't a deal breaker for me, and it might not be for you. The second of these new frustrations is that as the system grows more complex, so too does your busy work. Bean and Nothingness does not have the lickety-split, smooth-as-butter interface of Snakebird. You will oftentimes solve a puzzle in your head long before you actually step onto the finish pad. This is a necessary evil, I think, but that's your call to make. Bean and Nothingness is also, to reiterate, hard as balls. But the developers run a Discord server where you can ask for hints from the community if you're stuck. And thus concludes phase 1 of my pitch. Hopefully by now you know if this game is gonna be your bag or not, and if it is, you are closing this video and leaving to play it. Phase 2 will involve more direct analysis of the mechanics and will run the risk of spoiling a little with regards to solutions, but I'll keep things generally to the early parts of the game just in case you change your mind. Phase 3 will be where I assume you're just here for my analysis and it'll be free range. Thanks! Bean and Nothingness starts out as simple as it possibly could, with the introduction of its 2 primary elements, rollers and bombs. Rollers lurch forward and roll in one direction when they spot you, and bombs are initially inert agents that are flung into motion at the lightest touch and explode on contact with anything. The 2 genders. These are presented, at first, as just being 2 differing ways to destroy breakable rocks, or you, if you're not careful. Rollers charge through them and bomb explosions destroy them within a small radius. However, you very quickly come to discover more uses for these things. There's Portal-style pressure plate shenanigans in this game for a start. Monsters weigh down switches. A roller might not be used to destroy rocks directly, but instead simply be used to start a bomb on its journey to explode those rocks, which is the first of many many interactions you'll discover between these agents. Bombs can destroy rollers and cause them to drop their current recipe on the ground so they can be reused, potentially in spots unreachable by you or an aggregation forming a recipe for something else entirely. There's a few peculiarities to notice too though. Bombs chain explosions, which you might have been able to predict, but they do it instantly. Telegraphed pretty strongly is the manner in which rollers lunge at you. They actually skip a space for their initial lurch and continue one space per turn after that, so they've actually got a pretty big instant death zone surrounding them. If you experiment a little more thoroughly, or discover this helpful note from Michelle, you'll find that bombs are repelled by water. One puzzle sees you building a stable oscillator that forms a temporary moving shield against line of sight. If you venture further into this game's engine, you might notice that for exactly one turn after a roller clunks against something, it's stunned and won't leap again immediately. And yes, this turns out to be crucial information for a particularly tricky puzzle you have access to very early on. That's the fun thing about this game. It takes a very player-directed approach to its difficulty curve. It's decidedly generous with regards to unlocking new levels for you to try out, which is necessary because there's no difficulty cap set in stone for any individual island, and it's very likely you'll hit a wall before you clear any of them fully. You just have the ability to walk right into endgame difficulty puzzles very shortly after booting up the game for the first time, which I love. Anyways, the moment Being in Nothingness really hooked me is when I moved on to the second island, was introduced to exactly one new monster and one new environmental gimmick, and the game's complexity was multiplied tenfold. This is where you really start to understand what kind of experience you're in for. So this is a bucket. What does it do? Well, it waddles around while picking up whatever beans it passes over, only dropping them upon being shot with your monster-spawning magic wand. It's a bean transportation machine, essentially. Along with this, we get switches that activate not with weight, but with the presence of beans of a certain color over them, whether they're held by you or the bucket. And just like that, the potential number of use cases for our beans, both inert and monsterfied, has increased significantly. Beans aren't necessarily used to spawn monsters anymore. They've been given a secondary use, and more use cases follow after this as well. With the buckets in turn, you can form recipes at a distance, you can retrieve beans from behind barriers. But, you know, it's another guy that's motionless and then moves in one orthogonal axis when pushed. Isn't that a little like the bomb guy? Well, no, that would be too predictable. Of course, there's an entire different set of rules with regards to how it interacts with things. Bombs explode upon collision with solid objects and rebound off water. Buckets rebound off solid objects and sink into water, never to be retrieved.
And I can get you to... Ah! Oh. So that's your interaction with water. I see.
Consequentially, stable bomb oscillations need to be discovered in the level geometry, but stable bucket oscillations can be built. The bucket's primary function, carrying beans around, is only usually the point of its inclusion in a puzzle's toolbox. Just as often, it's a solid thing for a bomb to explode off of, or an ergonomic method of repositioning rollers into different rows or columns. Furthermore, rollers are destroyed by explosions and drop their recipes on the ground. By contrast, buckets are immortal. All monsters block your wand beam, except buckets, which are functionally transparent to magic, not sight, but only when they're empty. If there's multiple beans of different colors on one tile when a bucket passes over it, there is a bean color preference hierarchy hard-coded into the bucket's behavior that decides which one it picks up. And how often could that information really be necessary? Surprisingly often. Okay, so this is where I really got hooked. One puzzle near the end of the island. It's called Through the Cracks. It is the moment that this game's merits became unignorable to me. So, alright, down there in the way of the goal is A, a shit ton of rocks, and B, a gate that requires a red bean to open. Easy so far, but before you can get there, you need to pass a gate that closes if you try carrying a red bean over. But that's not too bad. You might remember that a roller will drop its current recipe, in this case one red bean, on the ground after being exploded, and the roller itself doesn't trigger the red bean anti-gate, so you can smuggle one in just fine if you just let a roller follow you through the gate and then murder it. However, there's only enough beans for one bomb, and now you don't have any way of getting those rocks out of the picture. So, you need to use just one bomb to both kill a roller on this side of the tracks and blast out away to the finish at the same time. At this point, bereft of options, your eyes might drift to the additional resources you have. It's enough for one bucket and a second roller. This is what makes the puzzle possible, somehow. So the thing I love about this puzzle is that you end up using both of these extra tools completely counter to their primary function. The bucket doesn't carry anything, and the roller doesn't smash anything. The roller is just a temporary stopgap that holds an oscillating bucket at bay. This magical barrier can't be shot through, but the roller can still see you across the lake, and it has just enough room to charge, releasing the valve, allowing the bucket to collide with the bomb, which then explodes in this nook that can reach both the smuggled roller I mentioned earlier and nick one of the rocks in the way of the exit. You use these tertiary behaviors and oddities to build a goddamn machine in this puzzle. It's brilliant. And let me just say, it keeps going. Every island introduces a new monster, a new agent, a new X factor that multiplies the complexity of the system by another factor of 10. The next island brings these clouds that fire your magic beam when beings enter their line of sight, with all the same rules. After that, we get these nasty vine dudes that snag things within reach and slowly drag them one space per turn. How do you use that? Everything can now move one space at a time if there's a vine dude, but also it'll eat. There's this ice dude. Oh god, the ice dude just throttles this whole system. He freezes guys with these little diagonal beams and turns them to blocks of ice that are like their own thing. They can be pushed around, sink into water, and be walked on. It just keeps going. And trust me, every single one of these guys has an equally absurd laundry list of uses, contingencies, and interactions as the buckets did, and each one exposes particulars with earlier monsters too. I've purposefully left a lot of this game's system unspoiled for you, so if you're on the fence before now, here's another chance to close the video and play it for yourself. The biggest X factors in this game are saved for last, but in order to talk about that, I want to get a little into this game's story. I have a thematic reading of the Bean puzzle game. Sit tight. One of the only truly essential video essays on this website is called Hackenbush, A Window to a New World of Math, by one deeply talented Owen Maitzen, also known as H-Perks if you're a real one. It's both accessible and comprehensively educational. It gives a charming and faithful overview of a specific and fanciful field of mathematics. It's playful, intense, and offers a good helping of further reading after it's done. It starts out pretty simple, with the unusual but strangely intuitive proclamation that the states of a simple pen and paper game could be assigned numeric values based on which player it favors and by how many turns. This comes to be the starting assumption that leads to a vast and whimsical yet mathematically robust system of numerical notation unto itself, and the journey that Owen takes us on is full of surprises and witty insights.
You might be wondering if any position in any combinatorial game can be encapsulated in this way by a number. And to that, I would answer yes, provided you extend your idea of what a number is so far beyond your wildest imagination that you'll never look at math the same way again. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's stay on track and take things as they come.
Even as the learning curve of the video starts to strain on the layman's brain, around here or so, he never loses sight of the original spark of inspiration. There's always little moments where he goes back and discusses a little Hackenbush strategy to make this all make sense, just like in the original book he based this off of.
Once again, we have two numbers on the same side of the bar. And we could define 1/4 like this, but we can simplify things again, this time by discarding the 1. If you think about it, red wants the value of this position to be as low as possible, so given the choice between 1/2 and 1, they're never going to want to pick 1.
It's beautiful, absurd, even a little thrilling to see this small question blossom into such a rich field of mathematical theory right before our very eyes. However, what's really special about this video is the story it tells. It tells a story about math, the stodgy and deterministic set of solvable problems we're introduced to in school being picked apart and transformed into a medium of storytelling. It's a story about discovering that the objective fields are more subjective than you once thought. As it is with every field of study at its highest level, inspiration exists stably alongside procedure. Hackenbush, A Window to a New World of Math, is a video about laying the train tracks behind the train. And that's why I consider it essential viewing for everyone, but especially people who want to become actors in their chosen field of study. It's a vision of what could be your future, showing that all things academic will eventually become art at a high enough level. So, originally, I wanted to bring this video up as one of my classic rhetorical asides, but upon revisiting it, I discovered that Let's talk a little about this game's setting, because it's a bit strange and hard to figure out at first. You play as this unnamed girl, and you're wandering an ancient temple that your pet bunny led you to. The puzzles are, lore-wise, explained to be in service of a grand tradition of beings and monsters. This temple was also, at some point in the past, discovered anew by a bunch of contemporary academic folks who formed a research institution around it and then also mysteriously disappeared. You piece this together bit by reading all the field notes these guys have been leaving around. This setting, along with the game having actually been made by a bunch of math majors in real life, makes me want to try analyzing the story through that lens. I believe that Being in Nothingness tells a beautiful and optimistic story about academia, and it details a rich journey for both these unseen characters and for the player. Every puzzle in Being in Nothingness has its own set of recipes. It's the strangest and most pervasive mechanic in the game, the choice to have every puzzle work differently with regards to which beans spawn which monsters, at first, comes across as arbitrary and kind of oppressive. It's an added layer of rules overhead and mechanical fiddliness over what is, initially, a pretty normal-feeling puzzle game. This perception changes radically over the tens of hours you spend with the game. First they add the wrinkle with monsters dropping their current recipe on the ground when destroyed, and suddenly it starts to mean something a little more, as puzzles come to frequently involve forming recipes from smaller parts. Soon enough, the available recipes of a puzzle will become part of your initial parse of the game state, as they often dictate what is possible and impossible. On reaching for it, the entire goal of the puzzle is to excise this one bean from its nest to deactivate the bean switch and open the door, and vines can grab beans, so you really just need to get a vines recipe onto that middle island and you're good to go. However, you can't just use another vine to drag the recipe onto that island directly, because on this puzzle, vines constitute two beans, and a vine is never going to reach past a bean to get one that's further away. The solution actually turns out to be extremely involved, which is why you start with 11 white beans. In one puzzle, a recipe is included as a de-cheesing measure, which I think is really funny. The roller recipe on the sandy balloon is what stops the solution from being exactly the same as the tiled balloon. You have 5 islands to come to terms with this system of beans and recipes. You learn the land, everything that any combination of beans could mean for the proceedings, but then the game slowly begins poking holes in this paradigm. This coincides with a few important story beats that I'll go over now. So, if you're reading the field notes while you're playing, you might notice some mutterings among the still unseen academics detailing plans to create an artificial island with their own monster, and the 6th island is where those plans finally come to fruition, which is just... it's very cute. I love that these background characters get to have this level of agency, that the tropey, ancient bean tradition isn't as crystallized as it might have seemed. But along with this, we discover that the temple seems to have spontaneously created puzzles involving the new monster after it was invented, which is very whimsical and mysterious, but also oddly true to life. You might start by asking if states of a game can be assigned numerical values, but then you discover an entire system of arithmetic as if it was waiting for you there the entire time. This is the point in the game where the possibility space officially becomes a little too big. Like, the new monster is this blob fella who transforms into other monsters when touched by them, or rather, when that monster's primary interaction is imparted onto it. Like, vines have to grab it, clouds have to zap it, icicles have to freeze it, and you have to then break it against something. This game is so dumb. Now, this easily could have been the last mechanic they introduced, right? Like, this island is extremely tough, some of the most infamously difficult puzzles are right here, and it makes you use everything you've learned so far by employing this new wild card. But as it turns out, you're still thinking 6 dimensions too narrowly. Islands 7, 8, and 9 constitute a triple whammy of game changers, as the game systematically deconstructs the assumptions baked into its basis interaction, that being beans and recipes. Firstly, the island of the Eichinger Kurayama creature. It's named after 2 of the characters in the game. It's so cute. This game is so fucking cute. This little monstrosity is such a strange set of mechanics. It dispenses beans of its color if there's none of them left in the level, but it's also alive. When it's yet to dispense a bean, it's in a hostile state where anything that passes over it will be snagged and frozen in place until the creature is made to dispense a bean. But more importantly, these guys make beans. After so many puzzles built around scarce resources, you suddenly have multiple puzzles where you can fashion, potentially, unlimited beans for yourself. You can build a machine that spits an endless fountain of buckets as they march to their death. We're in a lawless place. Puzzles start to more regularly have multiple solutions, or rather, an intended solution and a stupid one that I find after using the infinite resources at my disposal to massively overcomplicate things. Suddenly, you become able to engineer your way around missed key realizations conditions using a combination of ingenuity and determination to brute force intricate alternate paths to victory. Alex Diener ended up finding a bunch of extremely cool ones in his playthrough of this island. I love his solve for merely it rolls along. He didn't figure out a way to keep the cloud from re-zapping and eliminating that white bean and deactivating the switch, so he set up a nightmarish scaffold of bombs to just murder every cloud on screen at the same time. And let's give a shout out to Joe Plays Puzzle Games for whatever the fuck is going on here.
Yes, again, I'm done. Oh my gosh. What was that? I feel like I can't have done that correctly.
And that's not it, of course. You should know by now that the basic functionality of any given monster is only sometimes given attention. There's puzzles about storing the state of a monster in the creature's tentacles before releasing it again. There's puzzles where you have to notice that feeding a creature a bean to activate it counts as consuming that bean for the purposes of getting it dispensed again. There's even a couple puzzles where you need to exploit the flatness of the monster. This is my favorite monster in the game. It's so bean and nothingness. But we're not done. On the next island comes these plates that shift the colors of beans that pass over them. Petals, they're called. Its rules are pretty simple in comparison to the last guy at least, but this still multiplies the game's puzzle complexity in a few directions at once. Like on one pile you'll have puzzles where you're just given 5 white beans that you can turn either blue or red, puzzles of managing scarce resources but with even less scaffolding than usual as you're entrusted to put the pieces together yourself, but alongside these, we have puzzles where you're just immediately greeted with a creature and a petal, and since changing the color of a bean counts as eliminating it, you can just walk back and forth to get infinite beans. Don't worry, they're still hard. But do you see what's happening here? You're growing into the field. These most recent additions don't ask you to learn more mechanics, Faf, so much as they just ask you to bring more of yourself to the process, entrusting control of economy and material, asking you to show your work. Every time a puzzle seems to be built with some kind of mechanism to enforce a certain restriction, part of the solution is to exploit it or even break it altogether. Every time. Like, it's a joke I got weary of as the game went on, but I kind of love it at the same time. This comes to a head in the final chapter, with a mechanical twist that made my stomach drop at the sheer size of the new possibility space. The Island of the Guardians introduces these plates that have a little picture of one of the game's monsters on them, and putting beans onto these plates determines the corresponding monster's recipe. You've spent this entire game working around the limitations imposed by these recipes. You've learned to read the specific cycles of creation and destruction that each puzzle has, and in one fell swoop, it's dismantled before your very eyes. This is, really, just the perfect final mechanic to introduce. Like, there's a few rules you need to learn regarding these guys specifically, like, if 2 recipes conflict, then the beans become inert. Vines dragging a bean over a plate counts for writing a recipe, but a bucket carrying one doesn't. But a majority of the epiphanies you have on this island relate to how the logistics for every monster are modified by the fact that recipes can be rewritten on the fly. Rollers are now remote bean transmission capsules, as one can be sent on its way and then primed to drop something else on the ground when it's exploded. Icicles are the primary ingredient of a bean duplication glitch. The inaccessible beans that sit undigested inside a vine can now be part of a deliberate meal you prepare, as they'll count with regards to the recipe plate it's sitting on. Frank noticed back on Island 3 that the clouds won't zap the beans a second time by themselves, and was asking if it could be made to do so, but you might have not yet understood why you would ever need the cloud to do such a thing. Well, since then, you might have discovered that clouds zap whenever beans come into their view, which means it can be made to re-zap them if something temporarily obscures the beans in its line of sight before moving out of the way, which you can imagine would be pretty useful if the beans could come to create something else after the cloud has already attempted to zap them once. And now I can talk about my favorite puzzle in the game. Just One Drop. It's a puzzle that I think could be described as a well-structured joke. It looks pretty simple. At first, you want to make a roller to break that rock, but the roller's recipe plate is behind an inaccessible wall of slime and a small pool of water. Okay, so it's a little tricky, but you can pretty easily make a vine and have it be distracted for long enough that you can create an icicle that it'll eat, freezing it, allowing you to make a bridge to the roller recipe. So, up until this point, I hadn't actually bothered to parse what that mechanism on the upper left was asking me to do, and this is where I ended up running nose first into it. It's a creature on top of a bean detector. It needs to dispense a cyan bean to trigger the switch and open the gate, which means I have to, at some point, use up all the cyan beans I have available, which is impossible. right? For any monster to be created, it needs to first have a recipe written on a plate, and you can't spawn a monster on the plate, so that bean can never be consumed. The puzzle is impossible. So I pressed restart, trying to think of how that last cyan bean could possibly ever be eliminated, and my eyes eventually landed on that tiny little pool of water that I thoughtlessly filled with ice 30 minutes ago. I've lost beans in the water accidentally before, by blowing up a vine one turn too early. Does that count as eliminating them? Well, yes, it does. Cue the next hour of my life as I fashioned a bean duplication glitch utilizing the recipe plates in the icicle to create infinite red beans, and through a painstaking process, used these infinite resources to position a vine on top of the barrier of slime in such a way where it could snag its own recipe off the plate and onto the slime, and then position a second vine on the other side that could carry that cyan bean across the pool and be frozen prematurely so it would let that bean fall into the abyss, never to be seen again. Twice! I love this. I can't believe the game evolved to this point without me even noticing, from puzzle solving into fashioning some kind of engineering hypothesis and spending some amount of man-hours putting it into practice. This is where the Steven sausage roll to Zachtronics continuum reaches its conclusion. My solution wasn't even the only one. Like, the other primary method is to transport yourself across the slime by getting frozen and then pushed, and then being carried back over the pool of water where you can then just plop the bean in the pond by dropping it from your inventory. I'm realizing now that this video is just me explaining the solutions to puzzles in a video game that I like. I really hope this stim is as exciting for you as it is for me. The two hardest puzzles on this island are 4 Tiny Islands and Adventure. Adventure is the trickiest resource management puzzle in the game. Players can get stuck trying to fashion a bean duplication glitch, but will find it impossible. Instead, you have to scrounge the most out of everything you have available. The solution is incredibly strict and involves doing a few things that might seem wasteful at first, but actually give the biggest net gain of beans possible. You also need to figure out that you can travel back and forth between parts of the map that seemed like one-way trips in order to snag the one extra bean that makes it all possible from the icicle recipe plate. It's a densely orchestrated symphony of logic. And just next to it, 4 Tiny Islands could not be more different. It's another infinite resource puzzle. You simply have all of the beans you could ever need and a nebulous goal to work towards. Getting these colors of beans onto that recipe plate using only vines, bombs, and 2 other recipe plates for making what amounts to bean capsules for the purposes of this puzzle. There is no intended solution for 4 Tiny Islands. It's too broad. It'd be like saying there's an intended proof of the Pythagorean theorem. Your solution might be clumsy and awkward, like mine, or it could be elegant and streamlined. This shit is so fucking hot. More puzzle games should just straight up make you write a thesis. We don't need any more simple to learn, hard to master puzzle systems. Fuck my shit up. Add a bunch of rules and contingencies and make me reckon with them directly. Being in Nothingness isn't an elegant and controlled exploration of mechanics and their consequences, nor is it completely open and purely self-directed. Being in Nothingness details the journey from finding a puzzle solution to finding your solution. It details the journey from solving equations to writing dissertations, from defining X to playing Hack-and-Bush. And having this all underscored by this almost unbearably sweet Pixar movie-style narrative where your bunny companion turns out to have been made by the academics for the purposes of leading you here to rescue them. It's not just cute, it's life-affirming. It's an expression of the inherent beauty found within accruing knowledge itself. The narrative climaxes with the first 6-bean difficulty puzzle in the game. The first impression is probably amusement at the punny title and pure shock at the blinding absurdity of what you're looking at. It's not really a 6-bean puzzle, it's more like an extremely long 3-bean one, but the joke lands either way. It's daunting. It's hard to figure out what you're even capable of doing at first. You have just 4 beans available to you, 2 entire quadrants of the map are inaccessible at present, and there's 4 gates to open. I'd go as far as to say that the process of solving this puzzle was emotionally moving. Something about staring at this blank wall for hours before eventually finding ways to eke my way around the map, being made to determine that this is indeed the part where the puzzle expects me to find a way into that southeast quadrant, slowly building a network and crafting infrastructure that will allow me to carry infinite beans anywhere on the map before finally solving every one of these little mini puzzles with the bean detector switches that had been in the corner of my vision the entire time. Creation, exaltation, beauty. There's actually another island of puzzles after this. Like, the academics had to do something with all that time they spent waiting for you after all, but don't worry, it's not a hardcore endgame challenge. Speaking with the developers, I was able to determine that this island was intended as a sort of B-sides museum, puzzles with abandoned mechanics or methods, puzzles that were early in development and didn't have the right vibe anymore, a few guest spots from a friend. It's very cute, but something's different, right? You've learned so much. There's hardly anything the game can teach you at this point, but these puzzles are unscaffolded. They're like a little bit worse, a little less polished. The point of any puzzle could just be anything. For the first time in what is likely to be about 100 hours, you get to draw upon the books you've written and go at it with what you know. The puzzle is now to figure out which chapter of the book you're required to reference. Blasting through these final puzzles was also a pretty emotionally moving experience, but in a different way. It was bittersweet to feel that it was all finally coming to an end after my lifetime of playing, but it was beautiful to see the field of bean wizardry working as intended for 16 puzzles in a row. It's the resolution after the climax of the previous island, the gentle coming down. I feel like this beautiful field and endless sea is where I have come to rest, running free through the grass on all four legs. I'm home.
We have questions about the nature of games, and through our search for answers we begin to examine some of our core assumptions, eventually getting a golden opportunity to lay out a new system of simple rules that lead to an endless cascade of chaotic consequences far beyond the scope of our original inquiry. And that's where the real creativity comes in, and it feels more like you really are just playing games with the universe rather than doing calculations.
I didn't know you, Owen. We had just one interaction. I commented on the Hackenbush video when it was just beginning to gain steam, and you hearted it. That's it. But even so, you felt familiar to me. I saw myself in that Hackenbush video, that feverish fixation written out into a piece of art, a combined expression of reverence and divine obligation. I saw myself when I sat down to play Spin Doctor and experienced all these strange consequences of Marble Blast Gold spin physics in a row, like you were showing me all the functions of your favorite toy. I even saw myself in the way you played piano, the way you voiced those upper extensions on the fly. I saw myself when you wrote on your final upload that the music had long since gone from your life. I saw myself when I learned you had taken that life away. I don't know if we would have gotten along if I had reached out, but I still wish I had thought to. We would have had a lot to talk about, at least up until you left. I harbor grief over your passing, but I must understand that this grief is partially a projection of something sick and horrible inside of me. As I lose more of myself to fear, paralyzing, immobilizing fear as the music continues to fade and be replaced with ruminations, scar tissue built from rubbing the same insecurities and existential threats to my self-integrity until my thoughts run raw, I see more of myself within you. I'm scared. I wish I could have known you. I wish I could have followed you. But I need to say goodbye.